This happened just a month ago. I'm 32 now, trying to reboot my life after years of mental health struggles in the city. I thought moving to this small town would help me find some focus. I rented a little apartment above a dusty bookstore. It smelled of old paper and coffee, and I liked that. I thought it would be an easy place to work. I felt excited, maybe even hopeful. The first night was quiet. No sirens or honking cars like I'm used to. As I settled in, I started to hear flickering lights below. At first I thought it was just some quirky thing with the old wiring. But then I heard chanting. It was soft but distinct, flowing through the floorboards like a whisper. I shrugged it off. Could just be a local tradition, I figured. I returned to my laptop, never thinking much about it. Days passed, and I heard it again, sometimes louder, sometimes softer. I could never tell where it was coming from. I had put off venturing out much yet, but as I sat by the window I began to notice strange symbols carved into the sidewalk outside. They looked old, almost like a language I didn't understand. I felt uneasy, but I couldn't put my finger on why. The townspeople I met were friendly enough, but they had this strange air about them, almost like they were holding back their true feelings. One afternoon, I was at the local cafe, and I overheard a couple of older women talking. They said something about a witch who knew everyone's secrets. My ears perked up. I couldn't help but wonder if they were talking about me. A man named Greg, who seemed kind, approached me. He smiled, but I caught a hitch in his voice. "You should be careful, Miss Emily. The witch, she listens." I forced a laugh, thinking he was joking, but deep down I wasn't sure. Why were they all so cautious? The chanting grew stronger, echoing in my mind like a dreadful refrain. I decided to confront it, but I couldn't find the courage. Instead, I found myself pacing by the window, trying to focus on my work, but my heart raced. I kept glancing outside, half expecting someone to be standing there watching me. The night came, and I heard the chanting again. This time it felt urgent, alive. A chill ran down my spine. I thought I saw shadows moving outside, darting between the trees. Maybe it was just my imagination, but I couldn't be sure. I felt trapped, like I was being pulled into something I didn't fully understand. Then, as the chanting swelled, a thought struck me. What if they were right? What if this witch really could see into the deepest parts of my past? I felt a sense of dread wash over me. Maybe my secret wasn't just mine anymore. Then I turned quickly, and my heart sank. A figure stood at the edge of the sidewalk just outside my window. My heart raced as I realized I didn't know who it was. They were just standing there, staring at me. I couldn't see their face clearly, but I knew they were watching. I froze. The figure remained still. Every instinct screamed for me to back away, but my feet felt glued to the floor. I squinted, trying to see better. The dim light from the street lamp barely illuminated the shadowy outline. I couldn't tell if it was a man or a woman. What I did know was that the longer they stood there, the more dread coiled around my chest. "Hello?" I called out, my voice shaky. No response. Just silence, except for the distant echo of the chanting swelling into an almost unbearable crescendo. I took a small step back, and the figure shifted slightly, as if aware of my movement. A wave of defiance surged through me. Maybe I should confront this. I moved closer to the window, inching my way forward. As I peered down, they raised their hands slowly, pointing at something on the sidewalk. An old carved symbol I hadn't noticed before. My breath caught. It looked like the others, but more intricate. Panic shot through me. "Who are you?" I demanded. My heart raced louder than the chanting, but there was still no answer. Just that unwavering stare locked onto me. The figure seemed to swallow the darkness around them. Then, something in my mind flickered. Fear and curiosity waged war. My therapist had always told me to seek the truth, no matter how uncomfortable. If this witch really could read my secrets, maybe I needed to understand what that meant. Before I could think better of it, I turned away from the window and grabbed my jacket off the back of a chair. I slipped out the front door, my breath fogging in the cold night air. The street was deserted, the faint chants wrapping around me like a shroud. I looked left and right, but the figure had vanished. A chill ran down my spine. Had I really seen them, or was it all in my head? I walked toward the area where the figure had stood. The pavement felt different beneath my shoes, almost as if it was alive. I knelt down to examine the symbol they had pointed at. It glowed faintly, illuminating my hands. I traced my fingers over the lines, feeling a strange warmth emanating from it. Suddenly the chanting got louder, a deafening chorus that felt as if it was coming from within me. I stumbled back, confusion and terror blending into something overwhelming. Just then, I noticed something else. A small object hidden among the leaves beside the sidewalk. I reached for it, my fingers brushing a cold metal pendant that looked like an emblem of the symbol. As I held it up, the singing stopped abruptly. Silence enveloped the street, thick and charged. I glanced over my shoulder, feeling 1,000 eyes on me. Had I found something meant to remain hidden? I could feel the weight of the townsfolk's caution pressing down on me. And then, I heard footsteps behind me. It wasn't the soft shuffling from before. These were firm, deliberate. I spun around, and there they were. Greg, his face pale, his eyes wide with fear. "Emily, you shouldn't have come here." The panic rose again. What had I missed? What were they hiding? I had to know, but even as I thought it, I felt the cold grip of fear tightening around me. Then everything went dark. I didn't just lose my sight. I felt swallowed by the darkness. The air thickened, trapping me in the void. My heart hammered in my chest, and the sound echoed loudly in my ears. I blinked, waiting for my eyes to adjust, but nothing changed. "Emily!" Greg's voice cut through the silence, sharp and urgent. I felt him reach for me, and I instinctively stepped back. My back hit something solid, the cool, reassuring solidity of a lamppost. Just a few feet away from me, I could sense the street, the symbol, and that pendant. I tried to steady my breathing, wrestling with the disorientation. "I can't see," I managed to say. What happened? Panic dissolved my thoughts into chaos. "It's okay, just stay calm." He sounded closer now. I heard him take a few careful steps, his feet crunching over leaves. "The symbols. They can do this. You need to leave." "Leave?" My panic flared. "What do you mean? What do you know?" The chanting resumed, surging back like an angry tide. My heart raced at the sound. It wasn't just noise. It felt like a call, beckoning me closer. I gripped the pendant tightly in my hand. "I found something, Greg. I have to understand it." "No." His voice was almost a shout, filled with urgency. "You don't understand. You don't know what you're dealing with." Before I could respond, the darkness flickered, revealing brief flashes of movement behind him, shadows dancing at the edge of my vision. "What's happening, Greg?" "I should have stopped you," he muttered. "I should have known you wouldn't listen." He hesitated, then whispered, "They're coming." My blood ran cold. An instinct kicked in, and I stepped toward him, desperate for something familiar in the unknown. "Who's coming? We need to go, Greg." In that moment, the darkness erupted into bursts of light, colors swirling like a nocturnal rainbow threatening to break through. My heart pounded as I strained to see. People, figures wrapped in cloaks, stood at the distant corners of the street, faces obscured by shadows. But I felt their presence. They surrounded us. "Emily, we need to hide." Greg's hand grasped my wrist, pulling me down beneath the lamppost's flicker. "Trust me." "Hide? From who?" My voice was low, but I was scared. "From them." He pointed into the swirling shadows beyond the lamppost light. Their chanting returned, louder, almost triumphant. It was a sound that promised power, promised knowledge. I felt the pendant grow warmer in my grip. What if they know something about me? They know everything, Emily. You're in over your head. In that moment, I understood how something small could grow too big to control. Not just for me, but for the entire town. Then I won't let them take it from me. Just as resolve settled within me, I heard the figures move. Emily, one voice called out, soft but authoritative. Join us. We know what you seek. I felt the weight of their words, pulling me toward the encroaching darkness. But then I remembered Greg's fear, the way it hung in the air between us. I looked back at him, desperately wanting an answer. But before I could speak, the ground beneath me trembled and the shadows crept closer, closing in. I realized then that I had stepped into something that would change everything. The shadows shifted again, and I felt my heart race. The cloaked figures closed in, their chanting weaving a hypnotic spell that tugged at my thoughts. I locked my grip on the pendant, its warmth igniting a flicker of courage inside me. Greg, I breathed. We can't just sit here. We need to find a place to hide away from them. His voice trembled, and I could sense his desperation. This isn't just about you anymore. It's about the town. I squinted into the darkness beyond. The figures were still chanting, but one stood out, her voice sharper, clearer. Emily, she beckoned, drawing near. You have the key. Release what you hold. I felt a rush of adrenaline. What do you mean? I don't know what you're talking about. Greg tugged my arm. Back away, Emily. Let's go. Before I could respond, the ground shifted again, this time more violently. Cracks erupted in the pavement, and an unnatural wind howled through the street. I stumbled, searching for balance, and before I could catch myself, I sensed a presence much closer now. Do you not hear the call? The cloaked figure stepped forward, revealing a sliver of her face beneath the hood. I couldn't make out her features, but her eyes glowed with an unsettling light. The power lies within you. Accept it, and you will know all secrets. No! Greg shouted defiantly. This isn't what you think, Emily. I felt confusion gnaw at me. The need to understand pulled me toward her, and yet Greg's fear kept me anchored. I glanced back at him, feeling trapped in a suffocating web of uncertainty. Don't let them influence you, he pleaded, his grip tightening around my arm. They want to use you. A sharp burst of wind tore through the night, extinguishing the dim lamppost light. I felt the pendant grow even warmer, almost like it was alive. I want to know the truth, I screamed, my voice swallowed by the chaos. The truth? The figure laughed lightly, a sound that dripped with malice. You don't even know what you're asking for. With renewed strength I pushed forward, breaking free from Greg's grasp. The chant swelled, enveloping me like a wave. Emily! Greg shouted, his voice cracking. As I stepped into the circle of cloaked figures, a sudden calm washed over me. The frantic sounds of the world faded, replaced by a singular focus. The pendant pulsed vibrantly in my hand, and I felt a connection. Something deep and ancient pulling me in. Join us, the figure said, her eyes boring into mine, and unlock your destiny. Just as I was about to heed her words, a loud crack split the night, and the ground shook beneath us. A fissure opened in the earth, glowing a sinister green. I stumbled backward, shock jolting me from my trance. That's when I saw it, I gasped. The glow radiated like a heartbeat, drawing my eyes. Something was emerging. Panic surged as I turned to Greg, who stood wide-eyed at the edge of the lamppost light, fear etched across his face. The chanting grew louder, punctuating the ominous tension. Emily, he cried, barely audible over the chaos. We have to go now. But I found myself frozen, the realization settling in. This was the moment that would change everything, and I had to make a choice. The fissure glowed brighter, casting eerie shadows that danced on the walls of the building surrounding us. My instincts screamed for me to run, but my feet felt like they were stuck in place. I couldn't tear my gaze from the crack in the ground or the deep green light pulsating from within. "Emily, please!" Greg's voice broke through the chaos, but my thoughts were racing. It was as if the light was calling me, promising revelations I had never dreamed of. "Do you see it?" I whispered, barely processing my own words. The beauty of the glow juxtaposed against the fear coursing through me created a strange pull, one I couldn't ignore. "Yes," Greg replied, desperation lacing his tone. "But it's dangerous. You can't get any closer." But the figure within the circle stepped forward again, sensing my hesitation. "The time is now, Emily. Embrace your power. Only you can stop this." "Stop what?" I shouted, my voice raw with emotion. "What are you talking about?" "Chaos." The figure's voice rang, suddenly intense, as another tremor surged through the ground. "Release it." I felt the pendant thrum in response, a rhythm that matched the pulsing glow. The very fabric of reality around us felt thin, as though I could poke through it and discover truths hidden away. Just then, a scream sliced through the air from the direction of Town Square. The sound was full of terror, a warning I couldn't ignore. "They're coming!" Greg yelled, panic flooding his voice. He pulled on my arm, and this time I stumbled back, finally breaking free from the pull of the figures. "Emily!" The chant turned into a cacophony, voices blending, but they were growing louder, sharper with intensity. I felt my resolve wavering. Suddenly a whirlwind of shadows burst from the fissure, wispy tendrils coiling into the air like smoke. They twisted together and formed shapes, figures that mirrored the cloaked ones. Greg stepped in front of me, his body rigid with a mix of fight and flight. "We have to run now," he urged, glancing back at the nightmarish spectacle. I hesitated, torn between following him or confronting the mystery hidden in the light. My heart raced as I processed Greg's warning. But before I could make up my mind, another figure broke away from the shadows and lunged toward us. It was more tangible, more real than the others. "Save yourself," it hissed, reaching for me with clawed fingers. Time slowed. I was paralyzed by fear. Just as I couldn't make sense of my surroundings, Greg, the shadows, the light, I caught a glimpse of my reflection in the eyes of the creature. I recognized that spark of desperation in its gaze. But amid my confusion, a sudden thought jolted me. What if I wasn't meant to fight this? Before I could act, I felt the warmth of the pendant surge through my body, and a voice in my head whispered clearly, "The truth awaits." Then everything went dark. In that moment of chaos, I realized I had made my choice, but the implications were far from clear. When the darkness lifted, I found myself in a vast, quiet void. It felt different from what I had just experienced. I gasped, trying to remember the last sound I had heard, or the last face I had seen, but chilling silence enveloped me. "Emily!" Greg's voice echoed, faint and distant. Relief washed over me, but it was quickly tempered by uncertainty. I turned, trying to locate him, but the nothingness stretched endlessly around me. "Greg!" I called, my voice barely a whisper in the emptiness. I felt a strange weight pressing down on me, as if the very air held many unspoken secrets. Just as panic began to claw at me, a soft light glimmered in the distance. It was a far cry from the rancorous glow of the fissure. Hesitantly I moved toward it, every step echoing in the silence. With each step, the light grew brighter, and soon I could see shapes emerging from the haze. Then, suddenly, I was back on the streets of our town. My feet stood on familiar pavement, my heart racing. But the scene before me was unsettling. The town square was filled with people. Except they were faces I barely recognized, locals whose names I knew, but whose lives felt worlds apart from mine. They stood in a circle, whispering among themselves, their expressions a mix of fear and awe. The fissure was gone, but the atmosphere shimmered with tension. I spotted Greg at the edge of the crowd, his face twisted in concern. He locked eyes with me and rushed over. "Where did you go?" he asked, his voice tight. "You just vanished." I don't know." I looked back at the gathering. The townspeople looked almost entranced, as if caught in a spell. "What is happening?" "They're talking about the witch," Greg said, glancing over his shoulder. "They think she can help." A wave of confusion washed over me. "Help with what?" Greg pointed at the center of the group. Now I could see an old woman, hunched and draped in a long cloak, her wild hair framing a face that seemed both familiar and foreign. The moment I spotted her, a chill ran down my spine. She looked just like the figure from the fissure, but this woman had a presence that felt more grounded, more real. "She claims she knows things about us. About—" Greg hesitated, looking around as if afraid of being overheard. "About what's coming." "What's coming?" I whispered, feeling a cold knot form in my stomach. Greg grabbed my arm, urging me closer to the crowd. "You need to hear this. She's revealing secrets, and people are scared. I think she might know what's behind all this." As we drew nearer, I caught snippets of murmured words. Secrets, fears, past mistakes surfacing like ghosts in the night. Then someone stepped forward and pointed at the woman. "You're lying. You're just a witch," the crowd gasped. It seemed that fear could turn even familiar faces into strangers. "Am I?" the woman replied, her voice like gravel. "Or do I merely speak truths you're not ready to face?" My breath caught in my throat as I felt the weight of her gaze. Something inside me shifted. I could sense the energy, raw and chaotic, swirling beneath the surface. This was no accident. This was something far deeper. And just like that, it all clicked. "The truth awaits," I murmured to myself, realizing the meaning behind those words. That was when I noticed a flash of green light flickering from the edge of town. It felt like a warning, or maybe a call to action. And I knew I would have to confront what lay hidden if we were to stand any chance of facing the chaos that was coming. As Greg pulled me closer to the crowd, I could feel a tremor of anxiety ripple through me. The old woman spoke with an authority that seemed to challenge the very fabric of our reality. Her voice cut through the whispers, commanding the attention of the townspeople as if they were all spellbound. "What truth do you think you can hide from me?" she demanded, eyes narrowing at the man who had called her a liar. "You think your past is buried? It lingers, always waiting for the right moment to rise again." I exchanged glances with Greg and noticed the unease etched on his face. "Maybe we should leave," I suggested, wanting to retreat from the throbbing tension, but he shook his head. "Just listen. There's something more," he urged, his eyes fixed on the old woman. She continued, her words like shards of glass dropping into our already fractured existence. "Your fears feed the darkness that stirs beneath this town. The fissure was merely the beginning." An uncomfortable silence settled over the crowd. I could see faces turning pale, hands gripping one another tightly. I felt the enormity of her claim anchor us all in disbelief. "Darkness? What do you mean?" a woman finally asked, breaking the spell. The witch's gaze sharpened, as if she could see right through their feigned bravado. "The truth is coming, whether you wish it or not. Secrets will be unearthed, and with them, the horrors you tried to forget." Before I could process her words, the air shifted around us, pulling at my senses. The previously flickering green light at the edge of town, now brighter and less distant, seemed to pulse like a heartbeat. "It's calling us," I whispered, surprised at how natural the words felt. I stepped away from the crowd, instinct drawing me toward that light. Greg grabbed my arm. "Where are you going?" he asked, panic rising in his voice. "I don't know, but I need to see what it is," I replied, feeling an urgency to break through the crowd. As we moved, I stole glances back at the old woman, who watched me with an inscrutable expression. It unnerved me. Was she able to see something I couldn't? The green light intensified as we got closer. It illuminated the dark sky with an otherworldly glow. The sensation of dread mixed with curiosity pushed me onward, while Greg followed reluctantly. Breaching the outskirts of town, we finally reached the source, a twisted, glowing tree pulsating with energy. The leaves shimmered unnaturally, casting emerald shadows around us. "This is it," I breathed out. "What does it mean?" Before Greg could respond, an ethereal voice echoed through the trees, resonating deep within us. "Your truths must be faced." "We should go," Greg insisted, stepping back, but I could hardly move. The tree trembled, and the ground vibrated beneath my feet. I felt rooted there, like the tree wanted to share its secrets. As if summoned by that ancient power, memories flooded my mind. Fears I had buried, feelings of shame, each one tied to the townsfolk standing behind me. "Emily, we need to leave," Greg shouted, panic twisting his voice. But the urgency in me swelled. This was our chance. I couldn't look away from the tree, and I knew I had to confront whatever was waiting for us. That's when I saw it. An image manifested in the light, the faces of people I recognized, and beneath that, a darkness. Their pasts mingled with shadows. The unease I felt turned into raw terror. "That's not possible," Greg cried, pulling on my arm. With a thunderous crack, the ground split apart near the tree, sending vibrations through the air. If the past was coming back, I needed to make sense of it. I turned to Greg, fear coursing through me. "We can't turn back now." But just then, a slim figure behind us shifted in the shadows. I barely caught a glimpse of what was rising. "We've awakened something," I realized, a sinking dread filling me as I faced the gathering storm. The figure stepped into the glow, its features obscured but somehow familiar. My heart raced, pounding in my ears. I strained to see more, but shadows concealed its form like a cloak. "Emily, we need to go." Greg's voice wavered as he pulled me back. There was panic in his eyes, but I felt an odd pull toward the figure. It was as if it knew something I didn't. "Wait," I said, trying to stay calm. "Who are you?" The silhouette surfaced further into the light. I gasped. It was a girl I used to know, Lila. She had vanished years ago, her disappearance hanging heavily over our town like a dark cloud. I hadn't thought of her in ages, but seeing her now was unsettling. "Lila," I whispered, disbelief twisting my stomach. Her mouth moved, but it took a moment to hear her voice almost drowned by the wind. "You shouldn't have come here." Each word felt like a weight, pressing against my chest. "Where have you been?" I felt a desperation creeping in. "Why did you leave?" "I didn't leave. I was taken." The words echoed in the stillness. Panic flared in Greg's eyes, and he stepped closer, ready to drag me away if I didn't move. The ground shook again, more violently this time. The luminous tree's light flickered, and Lila staggered, bracing herself against a nearby branch. "You have to listen. They're coming back. They don't want you here." "What are you saying?" I could barely process her words. "Who?" Suddenly, the tree sent out a surge of energy, the atmosphere sizzling with electricity. My hair stood on end, and shadows writhed beneath the leaves, forming figures that echoed Lila's warning. Outlines of those forgotten, the ones who'd been lost or silenced, strangers and neighbors alike, came into view around us. The air thickened with tension, reeking of something ancient and unresolved. I turned to Greg, searching for clarity in his eyes, but he looked more frightened than ever. "Emily, we have to leave." His voice cracked, breaking through my thoughts. But Lila's gaze was fixed on me, slipping through the chaos surrounding us. "You're tied to this place just like I am. They'll find you if you stay." Before I could respond, a chorus of whispers began to rise from the shadows. The echoes formed words, old regrets, lost hopes. Each revelation felt like a punch to the gut, dragging me closer to the truth. But which truth? I took a step forward, ignoring Greg's grip tightening on my arm. Lila, what is they? Who is coming? The ground shuddered again, and the echoes turned into screams. Everyone's fears materialized, swirling around us like a storm. I could feel the dread growing, threatening to swallow us whole. The shadows snarled, their forms shifting and twisting, hungry for something I couldn't name. "Emily, no!" Greg shouted as the dark figures lunged forward. I could only look on in terror. The moment hung heavily, charged with an urgency I'd never felt. Then everything went dark. I stumbled backward as the world around us seemed to fold in on itself. Veils of shadows rose like smoke, swallowing light. The tree's glow flickered out, replaced by an ominous silence that sent chills down my spine. "No!" I screamed into the void. "What's happening?" In that darkness I held on to one thought. The truth was screaming to be faced, but at what cost? I gasped as the darkness enveloped me. It felt like I was drowning, sinking deeper with each passing second. My heart raced, but there was no sound, no air to pierce the suffocating silence. Then a soft glow flickered to life, drawing me back from the edge of panic. I was no longer under the tree. Instead, I stood in a narrow hallway, walls lined with peeling wallpaper and fuzzy shapes lurking in the corner of my vision. The familiar scent of damp wood filled the air. I hesitated, glancing down at my hands, but they felt solid. "Where am I?" I muttered under my breath. Confusion tangled with the remnants of fear. A shadow darted past me and I whipped around, but it vanished before I could identify it. "Hello?" I called, my voice echoing in the tight space. The sound sent a shiver down my spine. Just then I spotted a door at the end of the hallway, slightly ajar. A sliver of light seeped through the crack, beckoning me forward. I moved cautiously, each step heavy with uncertainty. As I pushed the door open, a wave of warmth hit me, the brightness stinging my eyes. The room was filled with strange objects, old books piled high, dusty glass jars, and peculiar trinkets that twinkled under the ceiling's dim light. An old wooden table sat in the center, its surface cluttered with candles and herbs I couldn't name. "Lila," I whispered. I felt her presence, as if she might be hiding among the forgotten items. But there was no answer. Only silence draped over the room like a thick blanket. I stepped inside, drawn in by the pull of curiosity. As I scanned the shelves, my fingers brushed against a small, leather-bound book. It felt warm to the touch, like it held secrets waiting to be unlocked. Then I heard it, a soft murmur that seemed to emanate from the shadows, swirling around me like a gentle breeze. "Find her." I squinted, but the air shimmered, keeping the source hidden. Panic clutched at my throat. I needed to figure out what this place was. I opened the book, and the pages were filled with words that flickered like fire. They made little sense at first, but then one line caught my attention. "She sees and remembers all." "Who?" I breathed, the weight of recognition hitting me. It was as if the room warmed at my question. The shadows danced and shifted, leading me towards a far corner where an old mirror hung crookedly on the wall. I approached it, the whispers intensifying, more urgent now. I peered into the glass, sweating under the weight of dread. What would I see? Then I saw her, a dark figure reflecting back. My breath caught in my throat as I realized it was Lila. She looked older, more fragile, but still unmistakably her. I felt tears prick my eyes as I reached out, desperate for a connection. "Emily," she called softly, her voice crackling with emotion. "You have to get out. They're searching for you." Before I could respond, a loud crash echoed from the hallway, jolting me from the mirror's grip. I turned, heart racing, as shadows erupted into the room, swirling like a storm. "Run!" Lila's voice rang through the chaos, fear etched across her face. I didn't look back. I sprinted through the door, my thoughts racing ahead of me. What had I stumbled into, and what did Lila mean by they? I burst into the hallway again, but it was empty now, the shadows silent and still. I had to escape this nightmare, but with every breath I could feel the darkness creeping closer, hungry for the truth I was just beginning to uncover. Then, I heard them. The whispers turning into shouts. Find her. The race was on, and there would be no turning back. I sprinted down the hallway, my heart pounding like a war drum. Those voices, the urgent whispers, the shouts rising in crescendo, were drawing closer. I flung open every door I passed, desperate for an escape, for any glimmer of light, but each room I entered felt like a prison. Images of my town, my newfound home, flashed through my mind. Faces of both strangers and friends melded together in a quilt of urgent fear. One door led me to a staircase spiraling down into darkness. I hesitated only a moment. There was nothing behind me except the wrathful shadows, and something told me I had to keep moving. I raced downward, the walls damp and cool against my hands. As I reached the bottom, the air shifted, heavy and charged. I stepped into a vast underground chamber, lit by flickering torches that cast eerie shadows on the stone walls. Chains rattled in the corner, remnants of some forgotten past. In the center of the room was a crude altar, its surface stained dark with age. "Emily!" I turned at the sound of Greg's voice, relief flooding through me as I spotted him standing by a crumbling wall. He was breathless, panic lacing his otherwise kind features. "I thought you were lost." "As if I'd let them take me too," I managed, though uncertainty gnawed at my insides. "Do you feel it?" he asked, his voice low and strained. "The power? It's alive down here." I glanced around, suddenly aware of how the very air hummed with energy. "What is all of this?" "It's what they were hiding," he said, his eyes darting to the shadows surrounding us. "This is where the town keeps its secrets. It's some kind of den." Greg's words hung in the air, and the truth of it coiled around my throat. This was the very core of the town's fears, buried secrets, dread hidden in the basement. But there was more. The pulsing energy made me feel like I was here for a reason. "We need to go, now," he urged, stepping back as the echo of footsteps began to fill the chamber. Before I could answer, the shadows surged, thick tendrils reaching toward us, their wicked forms gliding like water against the stone. "They're coming," I gasped, clinging to Greg's arm. "Don't be afraid," he murmured. "We have to face this together." But could we unravel this tangled web of fear? A rumbling rose behind the altar. It reverberated through my bones, the walls somewhat crying out. The realization hit me. If we didn't confront the darkness, it would consume everything. "Emily," came a voice. I recognized it. Lila's. "You must remember." "Remember what?" I shouted into the void, the urgency thrumming in my veins. The shadows pulsed quicker, and suddenly it all became clearer. Memories I didn't know I held rushed forward in flashes. The town's history, my own past woven into its dark fabric. I remembered the symbols in the street, the town's secrets, the whispers in the night. "Everything has a purpose," Greg said, drawing my focus back to him. "We can end this, but you have to face your truth, your past." And then it struck me, as if the words Lila had spoken were etched into the very stone around us. I have to reclaim it, my power. "What do you mean?" Greg asked, confusion flashing in his eyes. "I need to confront the very thing they fear, the truth of who I am and who Lila was." Before Greg could respond, I stepped forward, my heart pounding in rhythm with the darkness. "Lila," I called out. "Show me." The shadows surged, wrapping themselves around me. For a heart-stopping moment, it felt like I would disappear, but I held my breath and let it consume me, feeling the pulse of every secret buried beneath the surface. Images surfaced, Lila's laughter, the day she vanished, the cries of a town that was somehow now intertwined with me. I could see it all, the connections forming like strands of a web, intricate yet fragile. "Emily!" Greg's voice carved through the haze, but his presence faded as I surrendered to the shadows. With a final force of will, I opened my eyes to the flickering chamber, now filled with a pulsing glow emanating from the altar. Central to it was that pendant, my pendant. It thrummed against my chest, a heartbeat of its own. "Your truth will set you free," I whispered, understanding. As I reached for the artifact, the shadows hissed, recoiling from the warmth emanating from my grasp. I felt the chaos around me shift, the darkness beginning to unravel. I couldn't tell what was real anymore, what was shadow or memory. And then, a realization. My choice was not just my own. It rippled throughout the town. What I was about to confront would not only shape my fate, but resonate through every life that had crossed paths with the mysteries hiding in the corners of their minds. "Are you with me?" I called out to Greg. He stepped up beside me, determination flooding his expression. "Always. Then together, we'll face whatever comes." And as I grasped the pendant with both hands, I felt the entire chamber tremble underfoot, awakening memories and secrets long neglected. With clarity, I declared, "Let the truth rise." In that moment, the shadows convulsed, shrieking as light burst forth, illuminating the chamber and banishing the dark. I held my breath, braced against the rush, knowing that our choices would echo long after the darkness receded, leaving whispers of questions yet unanswered. What truths lie ahead, and would the town ever be the same again?